We are back for the preview show. Harry Powell joins me as always, and we're going to discuss this weekend's UFC action. And it takes place at the Bridgestone Arena in Nashville, Tennessee. We got a crowd, Harry. It's not an Apex card. That's a good thing. Number one, to kick us off. Cory Sandhagen, Rob Font is your main event. Jessica Andrade against Tatiana Suarez is your co-main event. And the rest of the card is littered with good fights throughout. And we're going to discuss them all over the course of the next hour or so. Harry, I guess the number one thing, we're slowly but surely steering away from Apex shows. I think, from my opinion, having the different Apex shows was good at the time when it was a necessity, and I actually quite enjoyed it at the time. But I do feed off a lot of the energy, and I feel that the fighters do as well feed off the energy of those arena shows where the crowds are packed and they're getting into the fights. How do you feel about the move over from the Apex into kind of more arena shows? Would you like to see the Apex abolished altogether? How are you feeling about all that kind of thing?
So I agree with you that at the time in the lockdown, any MMA was good MMA for me. And then similarly, there were certain fights. I remember Justin Gaethje, Tony Ferguson as one of them. And all of us were sort of marveling at that you could hear the shots, right? And I think that gave us a new level of profound respect for these fighters, both from the power with which they could generate, but also the damage in which they're actually taking, the shots that they're actually able to withstand. And so I think that there was merit, there still is merit in having those sorts of shows available, but nothing beats a live crowd, both for us as an audience there in attendance, also us watching on the broadcast, but also, as you've rightly said, the fighters themselves. And so I think, to me, you kind of do this in a sort of a grading system, right? The card we have right now that we're going to talk over for the next 45 to an hour is a pretty good card. Like, some really, really interesting fights, some good names, some known names. And so this one, to me, qualifies just fine for an arena show, in the same vein that when the UFC came to London, obviously that's an arena show. Fine, no problem. If there's a card that you want to chuck together that's got a bunch of Dana White Contender Series people that are on it that may not have the household names that some of the others have, and you want to put that in the Apex, I haven't got a problem with that either. This is a business at the end of the day, and a business, its job is to be profitable and to continue running. So if the card isn't going to draw a sellout crowd, well, then don't take it to a crowd. That's fine. But I'm happy to see them move back toward the model of going to crowds. I think that's something that they're really starved of, at least in the US. So yeah, I'm down for grading systems. Don't need to abolish the Apex altogether.
Yeah, fair enough. I kind of I'm along those lines as well. And if you want to call it a tiered system, perhaps maybe for fight night cards, but we're here. We're in Nashville, and the main event, Harry, is Cory Sandhagen versus Rob Font. Obviously, originally what was on tap was Umar Nurmagomedov versus Cory Sandhagen. That's unfortunately fallen out. Nurmagomedov had to withdraw just a little while back. Rob Font has come in to take this fight on short notice. A little bit disappointed Nurmagomedov is there. I would have been excited to see him kind of go up, but look, let's not talk about something that's not going to happen. It may happen down the line. Rob Font stepped up. He is the guy that's going to go in there and take on Sandhagen. And you would expect this, Harry, on paper this fight to mainly play out on the feet. Obviously, Rob Font coming in off of a great win over Adrian Yanez in his last fight. Marlon Vera, Cory Sandhagen beat by split decision, but it should have been unanimous decision. That was a crazy scorecard in his last fight. What's your thoughts on the main event? How the guys match up? And maybe if you wanted to start maybe about I'm sure you're just as disappointed that we're not getting the chance to see Umar go up and challenge at the very top of the division.
Yeah, look, I mean, Cousin Umar is someone that we've all been excited about for a long time. Certainly he's in my modern MMA team, right? Somebody that can just put it all together and do so really beautifully, fluently. So the idea of him fighting somebody like Cory Sandhagen, who I have massive respect for Cory Sandhagen's style. As we've talked about ad nauseum on these shows, I really love a fighter that's long and can fight long, and Cory Sandhagen is one of those fighters. And so that was a matchup that really had me salivating. I don't expect to not see it in the future, right? I think both of those guys are going to be kicking around the top of the division until the end of their careers. Obviously, Cory Sandhagen's 31, and at the lighter divisions, we start to see those guys tail off as they go. But Cory Sandhagen absolutely still has at least 4 years in this sport if he wants them. Not a ton of miles on the body in terms of record. So, yeah, all roads lead to we could absolutely see Umar Nurmagomedov versus Cory Sandhagen down the line. Now, this main event, fair fucking play to Rob Font for stepping up. I hope that 100%. Man gets paid for taking that chance. I think stylistically on paper, and obviously we'll get into the nuts and bolts, but I think it's a tough fight for Rob Font. Rob Font is very, very hands heavy. And if you have the length and the leg reach of a Cory Sandhagen, you use that to your advantage. You mentioned about it being played out on the feet. I'm not sure I agree wholly. I think Cory Sandhagen would be very smart to mix in takedowns here to really sort of bring Rob Font's feet together, but also give his hands something else to focus on, right?
When is the last time you remember? Because I can't remember it vaguely, and that's why I would say that. I mean, there's the smart thing that we can do, and we're into the nuts and bolts now already. Let's get going here. We're into with Cory Sandhagen. You know, I would feel he is more well-rounded, but he does choose to kind of rely on his footwork, his elusiveness, and he's striking on the feet mainly in fights. I don't remember a time where he has decided to take it down. You're looking at fights, obviously, against Jose Aldo, which he lost. Oh, no, excuse me, that's Rob Font. I was getting mixed up there. Peter Yan, where he lost against Peter Yan. You know, TJ Dillashaw didn't choose to kind of mix it up a little bit. Even against Song Yadong, you know, a guy who we probably fancied that Cory Sandhagen would have better grappling against, didn't choose to do that, and nor did he in Marlon Vera's fight. You think that, you know, this fight could be a time to start doing it against someone like Rob Font?
So I think with Song Yadong, he came out to prove a point. Right? That's what it felt like to me. What it felt like to me is he came out and everyone was talking about how Song Yadong was more athletic, he hit way harder, and if they landed, that there will be big problems, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So it feels like Cory Sandhagen came out with a point to prove. He came out with a specific game plan to go and beat Song Yadong in his own wheelhouse. He was going to take the striking battle to him and try and beat him there. Cory Sandhagen is somebody that speaks to me as a very cerebral fighter, seems like a very cerebral person. And so when we saw the TJ Dillashaw, Jesus, it started.
You're sounding like me now.
Performance, he did mix in a bit of grappling, right? It wasn't grappling in the sense that he committed wholly to takedowns and took TJ down and did the things, but he threatened it. The same in the performance against Piotr Yan, right? There were takedowns mixed in. He attempted takedowns to mix in. I think with Rob Font, when you take a late notice replacement, Cory Sandhagen strikes me as the kind of guy that will say, okay, we've lost the Umar Nurmagomedov fight. Let's go out and let's win the fight in the most simple way and the efficient way possible. Well, when you're fighting Umar Nurmagomedov, you're going to be spending a significant portion of your camp grappling. You're going to have to, right? Because you know, come hell or high water, there's going to be a takedown from Umar Nurmagomedov somewhere. And you have to be confident that when it comes, you're going to be able to either defend it, counter it, or when you do get put down, start to build up. So there is going to be a ton of grappling-specific rounds that happened in this camp. It feels to me, and again, I could be way wrong, but if I look at Rob Font, I say, well, if I allow him into a steam, allow him to build up a steam, allow him to build up a rhythm, he's a pretty dangerous fighter. Good hands, good timing, good rhythm. He's tough. He can take a shot. Well, how do I break a rhythm in MMA? I break a rhythm with grappling. I break a rhythm by trying to push him against the fence, which I think is what's going to happen. Rob Font in the last couple of fights has found himself circling that back that back tram line, right? So Cory Sandhagen's got good footwork, good range, good length. He can absolutely do the same thing. Just mix in some takedowns, like mix in some clinch exchanges. Make Rob Font question when the next striking break is going to happen. How's he going to have to create that? Is he going to create that and you're going to land an elbow like you did against Song Yudong? Like, you have to make this, in my opinion, an MMA fight. That's the easiest route to victory here for me.
For Cory Sandhagen, I guess. For Rob Font on the other end, coming in, it doesn't really have anything to lose coming in here. And we've seen fighters fight really well when they have nothing to lose. And, he'll be hungry. He'll be eager to come in here and mix it up with the likes of Cory Sandhagen. That's the path he was hoping to find. Obviously, he probably would have liked a little bit longer to prepare for this fight, coming off the back of a good win over Yanez. But looking back at that Yanez fight, before he did get the finish, Yanez was landing his jab. He was landing some good shots, and Rob Font took them quite well, which also might give the confidence in Cory Sandhagen to feel that he's head and shoulders above Rob Font, even in the striking department here as well. And I'm wondering, it's a good question, and it's a good topic of conversation. And your point on him having a grapple heavy camp is very good, and that point stands 100%. I'm looking at Rob Font as a guy who has a really, really good jab and a solid overhand right or right straight. And then a guy who I don't know if he's going to be able to offer too much more other than that against Cory Sandhagen. And I can see Sandhagen being able to deal with all that Rob Font is going to put in front of him here on Saturday night. If you're Rob Font's coaches, what are you doing? What are you going to try to do to try and take Cory Sandhagen off his game?
You have to try and smother him. And I think Rob Font is quicker than Cory Sandhagen. He certainly wasn't quicker than Adrian Yanez, and not many are, right? But I feel as though, you see when Nathaniel Wood talks about he may give up a lot of range in his performances, in his outings, and he may give up power because these 145ers are just a bit bigger, but he won't be giving up speed. And if I'm Rob Font, I'm going to try and do something similar with Cory Sandhagen, because Cory Sandhagen is a volume fighter, so it's not like you're going to have to try and pull shots out of him. You're not going to have to try and draw him to start firing. But I would be looking as much as possible to pull him in, allow him to throw a 1 or even throw a 1-2, and dance out of the pocket and find your way back in and land counters. I'd be trying to work the legs of Cory Sandhagen as much as possible, simply because we know he's footwork heavy. And we know that he has long legs. And if he's got long legs and he is footwork heavy, well, we can just start reaching for those legs. Lots and lots of calf kicks. Obviously, be mindful of the takedown. We don't just want to immediately give those up. And I want you to try and work the body. We've got 5 rounds here, right? So we have lots and lots of time to invest in the body. We know Rob Font is tough. But I think if I'm his coaches, I am asking not to get into wars, not to get into combination battles with Cory Sandhagen, because I think Sandhagen has way more tools at his disposal.
For sure.
I'm asking him to pull a shot, pull a couple of shots if I need to, and then land something significant on the way back in. I want to chew up the leg, so we're starting combinations with low kicks and we're finishing combinations with low kicks if we need to. We're trying to skirt those tram lines, and we're trying to make Cory Sandhagen second guess entering in on shots. Then we start to even the playing field a little bit, and we can go to work from there. If we have invested in the body well enough, Cory Sandhagen will start to slow down, even if it's just by a couple of percentiles. That allows us to use our speed more than we have to necessarily use our chin. But it's a tough ask. It's a tough ask.
Are you expecting a finish in this fight?
I think we can see one. Yes. I mean, immediately.
Would you reckon it comes earlier or later? I reckon maybe Sandhagen, given the fact that Rob Font has taken this on short notice, we're slowly manifesting his game plan here. maybe you do choose to grapple early. Maybe you do try and land those body shots. Maybe you do try and get into the clinch and land knees against the clinch and show your strength in the clinch and just try and wear out Rob Font, who hasn't had the same amount of preparation time for this fight as Sandhagen. And then once you do that, maybe when some of the power or some of the strength has gone out of Rob Font, maybe that's when you can kind of slowly try to break him down on the feet. But I guess what you're trying to say overall is, you're taking a fight at short notice here. If you're Cory Sandhagen, you take the easiest route possible and you don't play with fire too early in this fight. Would that be right?
Yes, but then my own, I think it just depends on what mood Cory Sandhagen's in. Right, he spoke about something so well before or after his last fight. I can't quite remember, and it was about him preparing himself mentally for a performance. And he said, I've tried to go in super calm, and sometimes that felt good, sometimes that felt less good. I've tried to go in angry, frustrated, amped up, super adrenaline high, and he said I didn't really enjoy that either. I tried to go in cool, calm, collected, carefree, whatever. And he said I didn't really like that either. And the performance against Song Yudong, he said he felt like he cracked the mental game, where he went in a mixture of everything, just balanced with what he felt was the right level of anger, the right level of adrenaline, the right level of cool, the right level of carefree. And when he came out, he looked vicious. Looked like he was taking the chances as they were coming to him. Now, that could result in one of many things. I think Cory Sandhagen comes out and does the same thing, because we have to remember too, Rob Font has no pressure on him. He's coming short notice, whatever. Cory Sandhagen has a massive amount of pressure on him in this fight. If he goes out and loses to Rob Font, that's not good. That's not good at all.
No, it's not. And it leads me to the next topic that I did have, and that, do we believe here that Cory Sandhagen has what it takes to get back up in and get that title shot again? Because get a title shot, yeah, or to win a title, get a title shot, number one. Winning is another thing. Does he get, I think he's probably going to need one more after this if he's to get a title shot, to be honest. The way the UFC matched him up previously against Umar Nurmagomedov, a guy who's going to want to grapple him and take him out of his game, would lead me to think that they're looking at Cory Sandhagen as more of a gatekeeper in that division, more so than a title challenger at this stage. Now, that's, Cory Sandhagen going in there and taking that fight. I heard him talk about that Umar Nurmagomedov fight, and he was saying, look, this is my point to prove that I am not a gatekeeper. And somewhat, a fight like this, Harry, can be labeled somewhat of a gatekeeper fight as well. If Rob Font goes in and wins, he takes his position in the rankings as well. So do you think that Sandhagen is going to come out here with another point to prove, and that he might come in and be super aggressive from the very start? And, how do you foresee him and within the bantamweight title picture for the foreseeable future?
So I think he's in and around the title picture until he drops off. Is the honest answer. I feel like Cory Sandhagen might just be the Dustin Poirier of this division, where he is elite. Make absolutely no mistake about it. He is absolutely an elite fighter. I just don't know if he has that extra 0.3% that take him to the promised land and have a title wrapped around his waist. Now, could it be a situation where all the stars align and it's the right matchup on the right night? Of course, this is MMA at the end of the day. This is absolutely MMA at the end of the day. Rob Font is still improving. He's still getting better. He's still learning and growing as a fighter, of course. The problem, obviously, is he's 31 and primes and athleticism and all these sorts of things. Whatever. Fine. We can have that argument another day. To answer the easy question, do I think he's in and around a title picture? Yes, absolutely. I think he's in and around a title picture until everything just falls off a cliff, right? And then fine, everything happens for fighters. In terms of this fight, do I see him coming out of the gate? I really, honestly don't even know if Cory Sandhagen knows the answer to that question.
Yeah,
I think he will come in prepared to go. And when fighters say, "Oh, I'm prepared to go 5 hard rounds," I feel like in this instance, Cory Sandhagen is absolutely willing, if it's the most efficient method to victory, to go 5 rounds and 5 rounds in a way that will earn him a victory. In the same vein, I think if he starts to put hands on Rob Font and he starts to see Rob Font wilt a little bit, if he starts to really feel chinks in the armor, he'll start gearing up. And that could happen from second 15. That could happen in the 4th round. That could happen in the middle of the second. At any point that Cory Sandhagen starts to sniff, starts to smell that Rob Font maybe doesn't want to be in there as much as Cory Sandhagen does, or he starts to feel that there's a chink, that starts to feel that there's a break, when he starts to feel in a similar way to Miranda Maverick and Priscilla Cachoeira, and obviously that's a vast thing, a vast comparison to make, but Miranda Maverick stayed on the feet for a little while, got tagged, took the fight down and realized, this is not the same, lads. We're not the same here. And so for the next 3 rounds, just took her down and eventually finished her. I think Cory Sandhagen...
Bobby Green, Tony Ferguson, the same as well, and
exactly.
Bobby Green got sat down, immediately took the fight down and absolutely hammered Ferguson. It's like having that confidence to, know that you can take the fight wherever you want it to go is a huge advantage to bring into the octagon. And I think that Cory Sandhagen has that advantage on Saturday night, and I'm really, really looking forward to seeing how he uses it. We shall move on, Harry, to the co-main event, and that is Jessica Andrade versus Tatiana Suarez. The comeback train of Tatiana Suarez continues. Original opponent here was supposed to be Verna Jandiroba. That fight fell through. Jessica Andrade steps in off the back of 2 defeats in a row, one to Erin Blanchfield, where she lost by rear naked choke. The next by Yan Joinen, who she lost by a counter right punch. That wasn't a great performance for Andrade, and she's coming in here against another top prospect. You have to give her all the credit in the world here, Harry. On the back of 2 losses, you're coming in taking this fight on relatively short notice against an undefeated killer of the division so far, Tatiana Suarez, who performed really, really well and moved to 9-0 when she took on Montella De La Rosa in her last fight. Now, the big question and the big asterisk over this fight is, even though Jessica Andrade, I believe, has fallen off, it still is a good jump up in quality against a former champion here for Tatiana Suarez. But I feel her style and her strength will probably shine through in this fight. Having the confidence is something that we talked about in the last fight, of taking the fight wherever you want it to go. I think Tatiana Suarez has that advantage to her in her kind of elite level grappling that she brings in. Not that comfortable on the feet. So I think it will be Jessica Andrade trying to stop those takedowns and get off her big shots on the feet. What would you feel of my assessment of that fight?
I think you summed it up perfectly. And the only, Andrade just kind of made a career of fighting Tatiana Suarez, right? And what I mean by that is the far physically taller and the far rangier fighter. I mean, this is literally bread and butter for Jessica Andrade. And the other people that she's fought, unless it's a Joanna Jędrzejczyk, obviously slightly different prospect, but people are going to want to try and take her down because they know she's such a massive hitter on the feet. Now, the Yan Nan performance, that told us something about where Jessica Andrade is in her career. And so maybe Tatiana Suarez will fear Jessica Andrade just a touch less, just a fraction less, because she's seen now that there is, in the same vein, I remember, I bring this up all the time, I sound like a broken record, but Cody Garbrandt, when he fought Dominic Cruz, on the mic said, I fought this fight in my head 1,000 times because I have so much tape on this man. I can picture his every movement in my brain whenever I want to. I mean, exactly the same is true of Jessica Andrade at this point. You know the setups she's going to come with. You know exactly the shots that she's looking for. You know the angles with which she's coming to find them on. And does that mean that Tatiana Suarez is not going to get hit by them? Absolutely not. Against Montella De La Rosa, Montella De La Rosa is not a Jessica Andrade, right? And Tatiana Suarez, as you rightly said, didn't look comfortable on the feet, all things said. Now, when the grappling started, what are you going to do? These things happen in MMA. Tatiana Suarez is an elite level grappler. I think my issue and my real worry here for Tatiana Suarez is before the long layoff, we were looking at a 28-year-old with however many fights, 8 fights in her career. And you're saying she's got absolutely bags of time to get better. Bags and bags of time. We're now looking at a 32-year-old that's 9-0. And we're saying there are holes in this game here. That's a problem. Because if you beat Jessica Andrade, you don't get much more time to round out those holes. You're being pushed to the stratosphere. And that's a worry. That is a legitimate worry I have both in this specific fight for Tatiana Suarez, but also for what comes if she beats Jessica Andrade.
Yeah, and that's why I think that the Vernish-Andarova fight was a decent matchup for her, where it should have been maybe that fight and then maybe a fight like this. But look, she didn't really have too much choice in the matter, I would imagine. The name was put on the table, and fair play. Like, my worry here is for Jessica Andrade, who was knocked out pretty badly just 3 months ago, Harry. And look, I think stylistically, it was a smart move maybe for her to take this fight because she might not be at too much of a threat on the feet, but still, you never know what may happen. And, you've got to allow yourself the appropriate amount of time to recover. Would you agree that you feel that might be a little bit too soon for Jessica Andrade to come in here after getting so brutally knocked out?
Yeah, there's no way a fighter should be in a high-level mixed martial arts contest in 3 months after a knockout like that.
Yeah,
because
3 months ago, and then you're kind of coming in and doing the camp probably very soon after you've come off suspension.
We know, firsthand, you take a loss, you take a bad knockout, you don't just roll up to fight night in your gym jams, jump on the weighing scales the day before and say, sure, look, we're grand. I'll put some gloves on and we'll do the thing. No. We're in the gym and there's contact. It may be light sparring to begin with, but when you put pen to paper, you best believe Jessica Andrade is getting in and throwing some hands and taking some shots. And that's not what you want, especially not at this position in Jessica Andrade's career, who, she knows exactly who she is as a fighter. She is well within her rights to take whatever fight she wants to take. But it feels to me from an athletic commission's perspective, and I thought that there were medical suspensions given out to fighters. I know that they may not carry over from state to state to state, but surely 3 months is too soon for a fighter that took a knockout like Jessica Andrade did to be stepping back in.
And she's making quite the habit of it this year. I think this will be her 4th fight of 2023. She got in there also very only after a month of turnaround from that Lauren Murphy fight earlier on this year. We know how that went for her. Not great. Be interesting to see how she does against Tatiana Suarez. But just maybe to piggyback before and finalize your point about pushing Tatiana Suarez. This is it. It's make or break for her now. She's got to get over these challenges and any of the rest of the ones that she has ahead. And we'll talk about that next week. After I don't know, you're not around next week. I forgot about that for the BB. So we shall move on to, to the next one. And the next one is Dustin Jocoby versus Kennedy Nzechukwu. I always say it. Kennedy Nzechukwu. And this fight, there's a lot of pressure coming in on Jocoby here because he's losses coming in here to Khalil Roundtree, to Mazurkanov in his last fight. And you would think that as if Kennedy Nzechukwu really wants to come in here and trade with Dustin Jocoby, I think it would probably play into the hands of Jocoby more so than Kennedy himself, Harry. Would you agree?
Yeah, I mean, this one is low-key a real banger. Because Kennedy loves a war, absolutely.
Yeah, he's an absolute lunatic. He's a lunatic.
He is a fucking lunatic in there. Now, I really like Dustin Jocoby from a styles perspective because he's one of those, and I'm going to sound like I'm shitting on him now, and I'm not. He's not a great athlete, but he puts everything. He reminds me of Jan Blachowicz, right? Where the basics and the fundamentals are all really, really good. And that's what his bread and butter of his game is. There's not a ton of flash, right? You might see a spinning hook kick every now and again. You might see a spinning back fist every now and again. But predominantly, we're talking really strict kickboxing fundamentals with some nice takedown defense. And at this level, a pro MMA record of 18-7, that's good enough for me, right? That is good enough for me. Now, the UFC are doing this because Dustin Jocoby is 35. They tried to give him the opportunity of pushing, and he fell a little bit short, right? We've just talked about the Mirzakhanov loss. The Khalil Roundtree was obviously a really, really controversial fight. Ton of judging conversation happened around that one. And so the push didn't work, right? So for Kennedy now, he's coming off 3 straight finishes off 3 known names, and the UFC are offering him the push now. And so this to me is exactly the type of fight that should be made. You try to push Dustin Jocoby, he gets to a certain place in the rankings. The next guy now gets his push. I have absolutely no problem with it whatsoever. This could be an absolute barn burner because, as I've said, Kennedy is a bit of a mental bastard, but I would love to see him utilize his grappling because he's an absolutely huge gentleman. And I think you just make this an MMA fight, and that's how you take it away from Dustin Jocoby.
And Kennedy's looked like he's been growing and impressing and improving each fight. And I think this is a good jump up in competition for him too. We're not reaching for the stars here with him. It'll be very interesting to see how he goes and he handles Dustin Jocoby in that fight. Moving on to the next one, Harry, and that is Gavin Tucker, who will go in and take on a gentleman whose name I forgot, Diego Lopes, who was in there against Movsar Evloev in the last fight and really, really impressed in that defeat as well. And now, Harry, we get the chance to see, was it a flash in the pan? Because it has, sometimes we've seen guys come in and it has been a flash in the pan, or is this guy legit? Because in defeat against a really, really good opposition, he really kind of shined in defeat when he lost to Evloev. Would you agree?
100%. Like, he gave Movsar Evloev absolutely everything that he could take. Absolutely everything. One of the perfect examples. Now, okay, he lost, and this is one of the reasons why you don't do this, but he gave a perfect example of how to play an offensive, damage-centric guard in MMA. Just did it perfectly, was looking for triangles, was looking for arm bars, was looking for sweeps, but also landed a fuck ton of shots. Really, really, really good guard from the bottom. Now, as you say, and you mentioned this about Rob Font, there's an element with which when you take a fight on short notice that there's no pressure on you, right? And so if I'm Diego Lopes, did I go out and just throw the fucking kitchen sink at Movsar Evloev and just think, fuck it, let's see what happens? Maybe.
Yeah.
And actually, the reason why I love this specific matchup is because the UFC have done what they always do. You take a short notice fight and they say, okay, thank you very much for that. You've really helped keep our card together. What we're going to do now is we're going to descale the competition level drastically, and we're going to give you a fighter that is a pretty good fighter himself. Gavin Tucker, I like his style. Very, very, very tidy hands, can do the grappling himself, can do the takedown defense stuff himself. But this is an opportunity for Diego Lopes to come out, and if he performs the same way as he did against Movsar Evloev, he picks up a win here. And then the UFC say, okay, no problem. We've got someone here that we can start to build and start to bring through. But if it was, maybe not a flash in the pan, but if that was one of those situations where he's built up this massive steam of confidence because he knows I can absolutely lose nothing here. I am supposed to come in here and get absolutely destroyed by this guy. If that adrenaline, if that confidence boost isn't the same against Gavin Tucker, well, then it'll be a much closer fight. And Gavin Tucker may even take that win because he's absolutely capable of the skills he has.
Yeah, I don't think that we've seen the true capabilities of Gavin Tucker inside the octagon yet. We've seen flashes of it, for sure. But yeah, I'm very interested to see how he handles this test. I'm also very interested to see how Tanner Boser does in the next fight, Harry. He remains in the lightweight division, having moved down from heavyweight. His last fight, that didn't go to plan. He is now only 1 win in his last 5, and his back is big time against the wall here. I would imagine he's going to be fighting for his job once he comes in here and takes on Aleska Camur, who is vastly more inexperienced than Tanner Boser here. So what way do you kind of look at this matchup here? It's a pretty unusual one to have, such a disparaging kind of level of experience between the two guys. It's a tough one, isn't it?
This is a tough one. Like, this could either be a very, very quick finish by one or both of these guys, or it's going to be that fight that we talk about with disdain, which is two big meaty men doing two big meaty men things. Like, neither of these fighters are vastly skilled, right? Alexa Camur, both guys can hit hard. Obviously, they're big guys, fine. But neither of them are going to be doing big things in this UFC 205-pound division. And I mean, fair play to both of them for signing the contract and getting in there. But I don't expect big things from this fight, frankly.
No, I think this is a complete layup for Tanner Boser to try and get a win here, because if you're dropping the unanimous decisions to William Knight, and obviously a loss of a split decision against Negumereanu in his last fight, that doesn't really read too well on paper. And, Boser's been in there with some experienced guys. He's tasted heavyweight. He'll be, you would like to think he would have the strength advantage heading down into this fight as well. So, interesting to see. Like, I'm interested for this fight just to kind of see if Tanner Boser can get it done. Can he deal with the kind of mental capacity of having that much pressure on him to get the win? And it'll be interesting to see what happens in that one with Boser and Camur. Next is a fight that really does get the juices flowing, because anytime I see Ignacio Bahamondes' name, I get excited because he's a really flashy striker coming in here against Ludwig Klien. How high are you on Ignacio Bahamondes? He's very well-rounded, Harry. He's got a submission in his locker. He's got a knockout in his locker, and he's steadily progressing up the lightweight division as well as one of the prospects to look out for. How do you feel about this fight?
This is fight of the night for me. I don't see this being anything other than fight of the night. I mean, Cory Sandhagen, Rob Font might well pip that to the post, because as we've talked about, Rob Font's very tough. And if Cory Sandhagen can't get him out of there or doesn't want to get him out of there, he's going to rack up a ton of damage. But to me, Bahamondes is never in a boring fight. Absolutely, from second 1 to second 15 minute. I don't know what that is in seconds. Sorry, I was trying to do the maths in my head, but I fucked it.
The second 15 minutes is 30 minutes. You want these boys to stay in a half an hour?
Whatever the fuck it is, I don't know, whatever. He goes out and he goes to fight, right? All the shots are with damaging intentions. He's got a really, really nice frame for 155, really long legs, long arms, has an absolute beautifully diverse striking arsenal. And like you say, not a bad man for a submission either. And Ludwig Klien is a wild, wild bastard, to the point where sometimes that wildness gets him clipped and gets him caught, puts him in bad situations, like against Nate Landwehr. But he is absolutely up for a fight as well. And I expect big fireworks in this one. I think I'm higher on Bahamondes, but this could absolutely be a banana split, because Ludwig Klien hits really, really hard and is happy to take shots, to give shots. So I think, to me at least, this is more of an IQ test for Bahamondes than it is for Ludwig Klien. Because if Bahamondes can go and maybe not make this fight of the night, maybe fight at a smart clip that takes the fight away from Ludwig Klien in a technical perspective, I think I'd be more impressed with that come listening to the balance breakdown rather than being on it. But when I come to Sunday and I've watched the fights and I watch Ignacio Bahamondes take away the fight technically from Ludwig Klien, I'll have a much higher ceiling for his actual progression in the elite levels of this division.
Yeah, that's what I'm excited to see, because Klien has been in there with some guys. We've seen him fight to a draw in his last fight with Jai Herbert. So a good, solid test there between two prospects in the lightweight division. Maybe I'd be thinking the winner of that is either going to get pushed for a name or maybe pushed into to a top 15 fight if they were to win. So that fight will get us started off for the main card. We have a 6-fight main card here, and we'll head on and do a quick run through of the prelim fights. Next up on tap, Honey Barcelos versus Kyler Phillips. I saw Kyler Phillips a couple of years ago, man, and I was like, this guy has some big potential, but it's not really worked out for him. Obviously, he had some trouble, I think, with USADA and was on the shelf for a little bit. But, this is a good opportunity for him to come in against Honey Barcelos, who, a very well-rounded fighter in his own right, too. How do you see these two guys matching up in the bantamweight division, Harry?
I don't give a shit. I just want to see the grappling. I just like both of these fellas, really fun on the ground, really fun in the transitions, really good in their submission offense. I think actually Honey Barcelos is, as you say, maybe the more well-rounded fighter, but Kyler Phillips hits really hard and is more than happy to sit down on those ankles and grind them into the ground and throw some shoulder talk in. Like really hits hard. And Honey Barcelos, you go in and you fight Cousin Umar, and sure, these things fucking happen. But the way that he got finished was, he did not take that knockout well. And we're looking at 3 losses in his last 4, with the win coming against Trevin Jones, who at this point, I think we know where his ceiling is in this division. But look, Victor Henry, good fighter. Timur Valiev, we saw on the Ultimate Fighter recently that he's obviously a fantastic fighter. And then you've got Cousin Umar, who we're all raving about. So not exactly losses to be shameful about, but I would put Kyler Phillips in a similar vein of a Victor Henry, and maybe a far better fighter than a Trevin Jones. And so if past his prologue, then Honey Barcelos is up for a tough fight here. But with Kyler Phillips, it feels to me like this is the outside 15 veteran test for him.
Yeah.
And if he passes this and passes it well, then absolutely the UFC are like, okay, cool. We know that Marcelo Rojo is a good fighter and we saw what you did to him. Let's go and let's put a name. Let's put a name next to you and let's see what happens. So big upside for Kyler Phillips here. And frankly, if Honey Barcelos goes out and turns Kyler Phillips away, I think he kind of stakes his claim as being that gatekeeper to the top 15. And I have no problem with that either. Like, very good matchmaking. I think a lot of these fights now on the prelims are bangers all around.
Oh, 100%. And that brings me straight to the next one. That's Jeremiah Wells, who will come in and take on Carlston Harris. And I think that this one is an interesting fight, but I would say more of a fight that to see who's going to get another push. But both of these guys are 36, Harry. So, they're getting well on in their careers. Are they going to be pushed forward into the rankings or for a title? Probably not. This is just a good stylistic matchup, I think, between two guys who are more than ready to go in and put on a decent fight. I've been really impressed by Jeremiah Wells recently. Obviously, 2 big knockout wins against Blood Diamond and Court McGee. Like, you're getting Court McGee out of there. That's no mean feat, man. And obviously picking up a split decision win against Smelsberger. Look, we've seen Semmelsberger get knocked out or get finished in his last fight, but I think he is a good fighter too. I think he just made a couple of bad choices in that last fight. When you look at these two boys kind of match up, would you be? I'd be more and leaning towards Wells getting his hands raised towards the end of this fight, and it'd be interesting to see how it plays out. How do you feel?
Someone gets finished. That's my prediction.
I just think
neither guy throw shots at anything less than 80%. And both guys are hittable. So for sure, I think somebody goes to sleep here.
Yeah, I can't argue with that too much. I think it's a good kind of stylistic matchup that these two boys are going to come forward, and we'll see who the first one to drop is. Like I said, I fancy Jeremiah Wells. But a guy who always brings the action is who we're going to talk about next, and that's Billy Quarantillo, who is coming in to fight Damon Jackson. And Quarantillo, didn't have his way against Edson Barbosa. It was a difficult stylistic matchup for him. Tried to fight fire with fire, and it didn't work out for him. He's facing a different kind of a style of opponent in Damon Jackson, who is likely going to want to close the distance against Billy Q and try and take the fight down. And when Damon Jackson can do that, Harry, he's a very dangerous fighter.
Yeah, his top game is really underrated. And I think it's underrated because he may not be as well-rounded everywhere else. Certainly a veteran at this point. But to me, this is very much just what I would call a run-of-the-mill fight in this division, where the UFC doesn't really care who wins, frankly. If Damon Jackson wins, fine, he stays exactly where he is. If Billy Q wins, I don't really think Billy Q's going anywhere in this division. But he's going to be somebody that you put a guy against that you have some value and have some stock in, just to test him, just to see, is this guy the guy or is he not the guy? And
I don't think this is a good stylistic matchup for Billy Q, though, do you?
I don't know is the honest answer, because he's a volume guy and he's a guy that likes to wear fighters down. And I feel like Damon Jackson has the ability to have that done to him. But in the same vein, this really is going to be a rhythm fight, right? If Damon Jackson gets to those hips early and grounds Billy Q, it's a long fight because the confidence of Jackson will absolutely skyrocket. If Billy Q is able to stuff a couple of takedowns and land some shots on the exchanges, Damon Jackson's going to be questioning, what's my A game here? Like, how am I going to get this dude out of here / to the ground? That's really, it's that, I think.
Yeah, 100%. You explained it very well there. And yeah, it's going to be, I think this will be a fight where you'll probably be able to tell the story of the fight probably around 2.5 minutes into the first round once you see what everyone has. Now, look at if Damon Jackson doesn't get the takedown early days, I think the important thing, yourself and Shawnee and other people have kind of relied on not giving up on your game plan and sticking to it if you believe it's going to work, even if it doesn't work from the get-go. You just don't want any Damon Jackson shouldn't panic, and I don't think he is going to panic if the first couple of takedowns are stuffed. But I mean, if he chooses to stand and bang with Billy Q here, I think he'll be leading himself down into a world of trouble as well. So very interesting stylistic matchup here. But also another very interesting stylistic matchup, and a fight that I'm really looking forward to seeing is Jake Hadley versus Cody Durden, and that's the next fight on tap in the 125-pound division. And, Jake Hadley obviously had that disappointing loss to Alan Nascimento. Look at Nascimento, I rate. He's a good prospect coming up. You don't, do you? You're shaking your head? You don't really? You do? Okay. Carlos Candelero was the next to fall victim to Jake Hadley and Malcolm Gordon in his last fight. Finished in rounds 2 against Candelero, round 1 against Gordon. Looking to go out here and put it up to Cody Durden, who's coming in here off the back of a win over Charles Johnson, and a good win at that, because we've spoken about Charles Johnson here time again, Harry. A decent, well-rounded fighter, beatable, but if a guy is beating a guy like Charles Johnson, that he has a little bit about him. How do you see these two fighters shaping up? Do you fancy Hadley to get the win here? Do you think it's a good test for him? And where do you see him at in his career right now?
I think it's a great test for him. Again, it's an IQ test, right? In the Carlos Candelero fight, took too many shots. In the Malcolm Gordon fight, he took too many shots. And so I think my read on Jake Hadley is he is a guy that has an opportunity and has all of the intangibles to elevate up his physical and tangible skills into being a real player in this division. 100%. I just think at the moment, he is in a situation where he is still fighting the same fights he fought at a regional level. And when you get to the UFC, a regional level game plan, a regional level set of skills is not going to be enough. And so I like
it's game plan. It's game planning in levels, though, Harry. I think that's what, we talk about it at the highest level, but even from a more minuscule way you should be looking at coming into the UFC is that, sometimes your plan A will always work in the regional scene where you don't have to resort to a plan B or a plan C. But, you're going to have a couple of different looks and a couple of different game plans in your back pocket, no matter who you're facing inside the UFC. Obviously, the stakes and the levels get higher as you move up the rankings. But, we've seen it time and time again with regional level fighters coming in there and just being caught stuck against that UFC level competition. Hadley has been in there now. I do agree with you. He's a guy who's probably still figuring out his game and still learning on the job. But this is a good opponent for him to do it and to kind of see what else he's added onto his repertoire and see how well he's progressing up and how much he has leveled up in comparison to his last fight.
Yeah. So what I was going to finish on is
Sorry,
that
I interrupted.
that's fine. That there is when he fights, what it feels to me is that in the regional scene, he's just trying to break guys, right? So he'll go out, and the purpose of the striking is he's just going to sit on his shots more than you are, and he's so confident that he hits harder and his ability to take shots is better than the guys on the regional scene that he's going to break them. And then when it gets to the grappling, his entire MO in the grappling is to break people. And I just think when you get to the UFC, having that sole game plan of breaking people is fine. It's absolutely fine. There are tons and tons of fighters who go out there to break people, but they do it in a far more intelligent way, right? They do it in a far more intelligent way than just chucking your chin on the line. What did we talk about with Justin Gaethje last week? Is that up until the point of the last 2 or 3 performances, he has gone out and he's just said, my chin's better than yours. You can hit me as many times as you want. I'm not going anywhere. I'm going to stand here and I'm going to outland you. And then he gets finished. And then he says, oh, shit. Okay, let me do less of that, right? And then we see the performance against Tony Ferguson, and we see what he looks like against Dustin Poirier just one fight ago. And I feel like for Hadley, all of the skills are there. His grappling is fantastic. He has big power. He can sit on his shots well. He can move his head well. He can move his feet well. I just think that his game plan should be reversed, essentially. That breaking a guy is the underlining tone of everything you're doing, but everything you're actually doing is preservation of your own self and employing a game plan that wins you fights, because that's what will break guys in the longer term. And so Cody Durden, as you rightly say, if you get a win over Charles Johnson, you and I both rate Johnson pretty highly for his level in that division. That tells
100%.
me something about you. And Cody Durden, make no mistake about it, is a better fighter than the guy that got finished by Muhammad Bakayev. And so we have an interesting fight on our hands.
Absolutely, we do, yeah, and it'll be very exciting to see how Jake Hadley does in that fight. And I'm also very, very excited to see a guy who's next up. And I know you are too by your reaction, and that's Sean Woodson, who's coming in here to take on Dennis Bazukja. I'm going to call him. I don't know. Bazukja.
He's pulled out.
Oh, he's gone.
Mayron Santos is the guy now, right?
Oh, that's news to me. We're breaking news here on the spot.
I'm wrong. I'm on a wrong topology. I knew that he had some horrendous issues with pullouts. You are absolutely right. This is his 4th opponent.
That is to be forgiven, because if you look down through the fights that have been pulled out on this card, you will see Sean Woodson's name 4 times. So this is the 3 times, and then this is his 4th effort of getting an opponent here. So look, we can mix things up here a little bit. But he's coming in. He's a guy that I always enjoy. You know, Shawnee enjoys his style as well. Has that long boxing range, beautiful body shots, beautiful front kicks. Just when he's like Sean Woodson, when he gets in full flow, and I've seen this with lots of other fighters too, he's just so beautiful to look at. Like everything flows into one another, not in his stretched, or there's no overreaching for shots. Look at he has some blips in his game too, but I think the biggest concern for Sean Woodson, Harry, in his career is that it's been 2 start-stop. He's been injured. He can't get fights. He's lost a fight. There's been lots of breaks in between fights as well. We last seen him again and to prove the point in November in 2021 when he picked up a beautiful win by a couple hooks to the body against Colin Anglin. Coming in here again against Dennis Bazukja. And I'm very excited to see him. But Bazukja himself is coming in here off the back of a 7-fight win streak, 2 finishes in UAE Warriors and CCFC in his last fight, taking this fight on a little under 2 weeks or 2 months notice. So he is taking it on short notice, not super short notice. I don't know when exactly he came in, but it's going to be an interesting fight. But this is a tough challenge for Dennis Bazukja coming in here against Sean Woodson for his first fight.
Not many fighters make it to the severe spotlight. Not many fighters make it twice. And that's Shawnee Woodson, right? You guys talk about how high you are on him. Like there is something just gorgeous about the way he fights when he gets going. Right now, he had fought once in 2022, and it was a split draw against Luis Saldana.
Right.
But then, yeah, we have had 3 pullouts in just trying to get a fight right on this card. So, look, for Sean Woodson, I just want to see him. You know what I mean? Like I just want to see him. What's he been doing in his time away? Because we forget he came into the UFC with a win over Terrence McKinney. That's a fight that's aged well. He then goes out and absolutely beats the brakes off of Kyle Bochniak. He then goes out and, okay, he drops a DAS to Juicy J after looking just fine in that fight until he gets finished. Okay, no problem. Yusuf Zalal, all of us we understand that Yusuf Zalal is a good fighter, wins a split decision.
I went all in on Yusuf Zalal at one stage. I was
right.
But look, he's a guy. Yeah, he was a good fighter. I just believe with Zalal, he could not make everything click and make it happen in the UFC. It happens.
Absolutely agree. And then he goes out and whacks Colin Anglin. Fine, whatever. Now, I just want to see him again. Right? I'm not even necessarily bothered whether he wins or loses. Obviously, a win is what we're looking for every fighter. But I just want to see the performance. What have you been doing in this year off? What have you been doing? Let me see. I just want to see it. So that's the thing I'm most interested in, because when that guy gets going and when those hands start flowing and they start landing, boy, oh boy, is it a joy to watch.
Absolutely is. And last on top here, Asu Almabaev comes in and takes on old Osbourne for his UFC debut, coming in with a good finish rate with 8 submissions and 3 wins by knockout, Harry, and coming in for a difficult kind of UFC debut, really, against the guy in old Osbourne, who himself picked up a good win by split decision over Charles Johnson in his last fight. And, you know, we've seen the best of old Osbourne in there, and we've seen the worst of him in there. Obviously, things didn't go his way against Tyson Nam. But when he's on song, old Osbourne is a dangerous guy to take on, and he's carries some good power here. Is this fight at bantamweight? I know old Osbourne has fought. No, this is at flyweight as well. So Osbourne does carry a lot of power into that flyweight division. And, you know, Almabaev has his work cut out for him on his UFC debut. Would you agree?
Yeah, Almabaev this is a let's find out fight.
Yeah.
Right. He's come in 19 fights deep in his career, makes his UFC debut, and the UFC are saying, sure, look, what have you got for me? What have you got? If you go out and you destroy Ode Osbourne, okay, let's see. Like, we'll start pushing you. It wouldn't surprise me he's 29, right? So we're not hanging around here. It wouldn't surprise me if he goes out and puts a beating on Ode Osbourne and gets the win there, that we see him pushed relatively quickly into a couple of fights of more notoriety. For Ode Osbourne, this is you tell me where you are now. Because as you say, Tyson Nam, good fighter, very hot and cold. Ode Osbourne, hot and cold himself. And so the UFC are just saying, what should we be doing with you right now? Should we be going out and saying, you're 31, let's give you another run? Or should we be saying, okay, this is your place now. Your place in the UFC is you're going to welcome the debutantes, and that's where we are. Just to the point, Asu Almabaev has had a recent win over Zach Bukowski. Everyone knows that name. That's a good win, right? And then he goes out and finishes the last fight against, what's your man's name? Sorry, I'm just pulling it up. 1 second.
In his last fight?
A Kenneth Manigat. At Brave CFC. I don't know anything about that fighter, but
just a 3-and that guy is 3-1. I mean, a massive gap in experience there. But yeah, look, he's coming in here, like I said, on a massive win streak. Yeah, we will find out. We sure will find out. He's 29 years of age, and he's coming in here, and he better be on song, because old Osbourne will have his own ideas heading in there. That will get us kicked off for the fight card. Harry, for anyone watching along, you'll see us out now. If anyone is watching along, and I'm going to give you the opportunity to tell them any final thoughts, and, you know, maybe if they're to look out for someone on this card based off your opinion, what would you tell anybody?
Sean fucking Woodson is the answer. Look, I actually think this is a really, really good card. A really, really good card. there are, for the longest time, we've talked about UFC Fight Night cards and how we don't like the placement, or we don't like certain fights, or we don't like this, or we don't like that. All of these fights have something to talk about. All of these fights have something to give us. All of these fights have ramifications for divisions, whether it's fighters entering the division and we get to see whether we have something new or whether we don't, whether it's a gatekeeper discussion, whether it's who's going to get the next push. And then obviously we have the main event, which is absolutely cracking. So I really enjoy when fight night cards are built like this, where they have like a really nice balance between prospects, debutants that are interesting or could be interesting against interesting opponents that we already know and that we know their ceiling. And then obviously when we have the main events that are like this, of course, as we said at the top, it would have been really beautiful to see Cory Sandhagen fighting Kazunuma, but I think this is a fine replacement. And if you're Cory Sandhagen, you just take the fight that's put in front of you. And if you're Rob Font, you try and grab this opportunity with both hands. It should be a really, really, really nice night of fights. And again, 12 fight card. I like that.
I love it. It's the key. I've been enjoying that lately, as I do enjoy these shows and hearing Harry's thoughts at BJJ_Harry Powell is where you can find him on social media at IO'Neill MMA. We hope you all enjoy the fights on Saturday night. The Balance Breakdown will be back next week to take a look at those fights in great detail. And until then, take care.